Welcome, dear dreamer. Let the soft hush of night gather around you like a woven blanket of stars. Settle in. Let the day's clamour fall away, the errands, the clocks, the glowing screens, and come with me into a deeper silence. A silence that sings. Tonight, we do not walk through history as it happened, but as it was imagined. Not as dates in dusty books or facts etched into monuments, but as breaths passed from mouth to mouth in firelit whispers, in lullabies and tales told to wide-eyed children and weary travellers. These are not biographies, they are echoes, the kind that ripple through the centuries, shaping how entire peoples saw themselves, their gods, their enemies, their hopes. These stories were never meant to be precise. They were meant to be true in a different way, in the way dreams are true, or poetry, or a face you remember even after waking. They are the myths, the legends, the roots of imagination deep in the soil of time. Close your eyes now if you haven't already. Let your breathing slow, in and out. Feel the hush settle across your chest, down your arms, behind your eyes. Feel your body become still and your mind begin to float, not up, but in. Inward, toward memory, toward meaning, toward the stories that shape the world not by force, but by wonder. Tonight, we visit those who blurred the line between myth and memory, who walked with monsters, who danced with destiny, who loved, tricked, built, destroyed, wept, flew, fought, sacrificed, and sometimes, just sometimes, found peace. Some were gods, others mortals touched by fate. Some rode storms, others spoke to animals, some tricked kings or wrestled with the stars, but all of them are still with us. In the names of cities, in lullabies and statues, in the quiet awe we feel when we see the moon or the sea, or a sword resting in stone. These tales span continents and centuries, yet they share a pulse, a rhythm that speaks to something buried deep in us, a yearning for justice, for meaning, for wonder, for love. And so, dear dreamer, as you lie beneath your ceiling of constellations or the soft weight of your blanket, know this. You are about to step into a library not made of brick or bookshelves, but of breath and myth and time. A library of the human soul. Each chapter tonight is a doorway. Each figure, a keeper of their realm. Each tale, a lullaby written by the world's dreams. So listen not with logic, but with your bones, with the part of you that still believes in the sacred, in mountains that think, in rivers that remember, in gods who weep and mortals who endure. Let go now. Let your thoughts drift like lanterns across water. Let your body grow still, your breath gentle and wide. Let the myths rise up around you, like morning mist across a sacred hill. And as your breathing deepens and your thoughts begin to sway like old trees in a night wind, know that you are safe. Safe in the hush of story, safe in the arms of wonder. The first tale begins far to the east, in the land of the rising sun, a land where the sun is not just a star, but a goddess, where light itself once hid in a cave and the world waited in silence for her return. So hush now, dear dreamer. Let the story begin. In the beginning, before mountains had names and rivers remembered their paths, the world of the kami, spirits and deities, was forming from the swirling mists of creation. From the cleansing of the god Izanagi after his journey through the land of death came light itself. As he washed his left eye in the sacred river, a radiance poured forth. Not harsh like fire, but steady, golden and warm. That radiance became Amaterasu Omikami, the great goddess who shines in the sky. Her name means shining in heaven, and from her very being, the world inherited daylight, growth, and order. Unlike fire gods who rage or moon gods who watch in silence, Amaterasu was both nourishing and sovereign, the heart of heaven itself. Where her gaze fell, rice blossomed in green terraces, cherry blossoms awakened in shy bursts, and the ocean sparkled like scattered glass. Amaterasu took her place in the high celestial plain Takamagahara, where the kami resided. Her golden robes glowed like dawn, and the mirror she carried, Yata no Kagami, reflected not just her image, but truth itself. It is said she ruled not with thunder or commands, but through radiance, through example. Her palace in the heavens was a place of balance and rhythm, where seasons followed her steps, and the birds knew when to begin their songs. Yet even among gods, peace is never permanent. She had many siblings, born from different parts of Izanagi's purification, but none troubled her more than her stormy younger brother, Susanoo, the tempestuous god of the sea and storms. Where Amaterasu brought calm, Susanoo brought disruption. Where she lit the fields, he churned the oceans. He was born from Izanagi's nose, and perhaps that explained the way he sniffed out mischief wherever he went. Though they were divine kin, their natures clashed like summer against typhoon. One day, Susanoo, filled with fury and mischief, rampaged through Takamagahara in a fit of rage. He tore up rice fields Amaterasu had blessed, defiled sacred halls, and in his cruelest act, threw the flayed carcass of a celestial horse, one of her sacred animals, into the weaving hall of her maidens. The women screamed as blood splattered across their looms, and Amaterasu, overcome with sorrow and horror, withdrew from the world. She vanished into a cave deep within the heart of a mountain, Ame no Iwato, the heavenly rock cave, and pulled a great boulder across the entrance. Her golden light, once spread across heaven and earth, disappeared. The sky dimmed, the crops withered, the seasons faltered. A hush fell upon the world. Darkness was not merely the absence of light, it was the absence of balance, of warmth, of meaning. Without Amaterasu, life recoiled. The gods gathered in panic and sorrow. Birds forgot how to sing. The tides no longer knew when to retreat. In the dusky realm of the gods, there was chaos, but also resolve. The kami held council near the mouth of the cave, desperate to return their lost light. They tried pleading, they tried threats, they even tried music, but nothing moved the stone or the heart behind it. Then came Uzume, the goddess of mirth and dawn, whose laughter had once stirred sleeping mountains. With a wide grin and mischief of her own, she overturned a wooden tub and climbed atop it. By torchlight, she danced, wildly, freely, absurdly. Her clothes loosened, her feet stomped in rhythm, and her laughter pealed like bells through the stillness. The gods looked on, shocked, then amused, then roaring with laughter. Their mirth echoed into the cave. Amaterasu, still cloaked in gloom, heard something unfamiliar in the silence. Joy, curiosity stirred within her. Carefully, she pushed the stone aside, just enough to peer out. And there, just beyond the shadows, was a mirror, placed by the clever gods to catch her reflection. For the first time, Amaterasu saw herself not as burdened, not as queen, but as light. Beautiful, necessary, luminous. As she stepped forward, the gods leapt into action. The strong god, Ame no Tajikarao, seized the boulder and flung it behind him, locking the cave so she could never return to hiding. The light returned. The crops stirred. The wind carried warmth again. And so it was that Amaterasu, born from sorrow and retreated into grief, returned not by command, but by laughter, curiosity, and reflection. She became more than a sun goddess. She became the eternal reminder that light does not conquer darkness by force, but by presence. Her story, still echoed in every sunrise, became the cornerstone of a nation's soul. To this day, the imperial family of Japan traces its divine descent to Amaterasu. Her mirror, along with a jewel and a sword, form the imperial regalia of Japan, the symbols of authority, of sacred legacy, of dawn unbroken. And every morning, as the first light creeps across the mountains of Japan and brushes against temple rooftops, one might still imagine Amaterasu opening her eyes, just as you might now, dear dreamer, begin to close yours. Even after the cave was unsealed and the heavens bathed once again in golden brilliance, the story of Amaterasu did not end, for hers was not the kind of tale that fades with the setting sun. It was the beginning of a lineage, a symbol, a living myth, carried not only in scrolls and shrines, but in the very identity of a nation. In time, her light would descend from the heavens, not just metaphorically, but through bloodline and banner, shaping emperors, architecture, and entire cosmologies of reverence. According to Japan's most ancient texts, the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, Amaterasu entrusted her grandson, Ninigi no Mikoto, with 3 sacred treasures before sending him to Earth to bring peace and order to the lands below. A curved jewel, a mirror, and a sword, each representing the divine qualities of wisdom, truth, and valor. With these celestial gifts, Ninigi descended upon Mount Takachiho in Kyushu, his footsteps said to have left petals in their wake. Through him, the imperial line began, unbroken and eternal, and thus every emperor of Japan came to be considered a direct descendant of Amaterasu, chosen not merely by governance, but by divine inheritance. This belief formed the foundation of Japan's sacred monarchy, the chrysanthemum throne. The emperor, unlike mortal kings who rose and fell through conquest or betrayal, was viewed as a living bridge between heaven and earth. He did not merely rule, he represented. He embodied the light of Amaterasu in mortal form, a sun-gifted intermediary tasked with maintaining harmony and ritual between the kami and the people. Though emperors held differing degrees of political power throughout history, sometimes overshadowed by shoguns, sometimes cloistered behind palace walls, the spiritual symbolism of their divine origin remained unshaken. It gave legitimacy, not through the sword, but through the sun. Shrines across Japan, particularly the grand shrine of Ise, became sacred spaces where Amaterasu's presence was honored not as distant or abstract, but as familial and immediate. The inner shrine, Naiku, dedicated solely to her, is rebuilt every 20 years in an exact replica of its original form, a centuries-old ritual called Shikinen Sengu. It is not simply about preservation, but about continuity, about breathing new life into an eternal story. Even the act of rebuilding becomes prayer, an affirmation that light must always be renewed, even when it seems ever present. And so, each morning in Japan is more than the turning of time. It is a ritual in itself. As sunlight spills across rice fields and temple bells echo through sleeping towns, it's not just the earth that wakes, it is memory. Each sunrise is a whispered invocation to Amaterasu, a reenactment of that first light after her long retreat. The ritual bows of Shinto priests, the careful arrangement of offerings, the quiet footsteps in shrine courtyards, they are echoes of gratitude to the goddess who once left and returned. To this day, the mirror she once gazed into, the Yata no Kagami, is enshrined within the inner shrine at Ise, hidden from the public eye, its surface unseen but never forgotten. It is said that those who glimpse their true selves must do so not with eyes, but with reverence. The tale of Amaterasu also shaped the Japanese sense of self, not just individually, but as a people. To be children of the sun was not just political mythology. It became cultural consciousness. The national flag of Japan, a crimson circle upon a white field, is a visual invocation of her, Nishoki, the sun-mark banner. The very name of the nation, Nihon or Nippon, means origin of the sun. Even in language, her legacy shines. Poets through the ages have likened her rays to golden threads stitching the sky, and warriors once carried sun-shaped crests into battle, invoking her strength before sword met shield. But legends, like the sun itself, shift angles with the turning of time. During periods of nationalism, Amaterasu's story was invoked to sanctify conquest. In times of peace, she was remembered for her retreat, her return, and the power of reflection. After the Second World War, when the emperor publicly renounced his divine status, it was not a denial of the myth, but a regrounding of it, moving from doctrine to memory, from politics to poetry. Even stripped of formal divinity, the emperor remained the symbolic son of the people, and Amaterasu's warmth continued to shape rituals, festivals, and lullabies. Perhaps her greatest gift was not sunlight, but the rhythm of renewal. The lesson that even light can falter, hide, be forgotten, and still return. Just as crops regrow after frost, as silence yields to laughter, as darkness holds the seed of dawn, Amaterasu's tale reminds us that warmth does not vanish. It waits, it watches, and when the moment is right, it steps back into the world. So, as the stars settle and the hush of sleep drapes the earth once more, know that above you, beyond clouds and quiet, the goddess of the sun still rides the sky. And in the morning, when you stir from dream to waking light, you may remember, it is not just the sun that rises. It is a story, centuries old, still returning with every golden breath of dawn. Long before printing presses and glowing screens, before ink dried on parchment or stories echoed from radio towers, there lived a spider. Not just a spider, but a man too. And not just a man, but a trickster, a teacher, a whisperer of riddles and rhythms. His name was Anansi. In the warm pulse of West Africa, where baobab trees stretch like ancient sentinels and drumbeats carry far beyond the village fire, Anansi spun not just webs, but tales. Tales that danced and twisted, trickled and tangled through time like the very silk he wove. He was neither fully man nor fully beast, but something mythic in between. He wore the face of wit and the legs of strategy. Sometimes he walked upright like a merchant, cloak brushing the dust behind him. Other times he scuttled sideways, clever eyes glinting in the moonlight, unseen but ever near. His voice was many things, soft as a breeze, sharp as a thorn, sweet as ripe fruit, and slippery as oil. The children laughed at his mischief, the elders frowned at his tricks, but all, yes, all leaned in to listen. Because in every story he spun, there was more than entertainment. There was insight. Now in those early days, the world had people and places, rivers and rhythms, but it did not yet have stories, at least not for mortals. The tales, the great ones, the deep ones, the ones that carried truth dressed in laughter, belonged to the sky god, Nyame. High above in his celestial palace, Nyame kept all the stories in a great golden box sealed with thunder. People on earth had no myths, no parables, no clever animals or cautionary fables. The nights were long and wordless. Fires gave warmth, yes, but not wonder. Without stories, Dreams shrank like shadows at sunrise. Anansi, ever ambitious, ever impish, decided this would not do. And so, with a glint in his many eyes and a laugh curled like a secret at the edge of his mouth, he climbed. He climbed tall trees, leapt from branches, floated on silken threads until he reached the sky itself. There, before Nyame, Anansi made a request bold enough to silence even the thunderbirds. "Give me your stories," he said. "Let the people below have them too." Nyame laughed, not kindly, not cruelly, but deeply. "You?" he said, amused. "A Spider-Man who scurries and jokes? You want the tales that only the gods should wield?" Anansi, unfazed, bowed low. "Name your price," he said. The sky god, knowing well the impossibility of what he'd say next, set 3 conditions. "Bring me Onini the python, Osebo the leopard, and the Momoboro hornets, all alive. Then, and only then, shall you have your stories." No one had ever trapped Onini, who was longer than a canoe and wise enough to spot trickery from a mile. Osebo's claws had ended more than one brave hunter's journey. And the hornets? They were fury given wings. Nyame's list was a denial wrapped in a dare. But Anansi smiled. For where others saw power, he saw pattern. Where others feared danger, he found delight. First, he sought Onini the python. Anansi fashioned a long branch and laid it beside the river bank. Then he played his part. He began arguing with his wife aloud for all to hear. "Onini is not as long as this stick." "He is longer," she yelled back. "No, shorter." "Then prove it." With perfect timing, Onini slithered near, curious. Anansi turned to him. "O wise python, help us end our quarrel. Lie beside this stick and show us your length." Proud of his might, Onini agreed. But as he straightened, Anansi wrapped vine after vine around him to mark the measurement until Onini was tied tighter than a drum. Into a sack he went. Next came Osebo the leopard. Anansi dug a deep pit along the leopard's trail and covered it with leaves. At night, the leopard fell in. "Anansi, help me," the beast growled. Anansi lowered a ladder, but when Osebo climbed halfway, he pulled it and dropped the leopard, dazed, into a net. For the Momoboro hornets, Anansi filled a gourd with water, then splashed it on a nearby hive. "Oh no!" he cried. "Rain is coming! Quick, hide in this dry gourd!" The hornets, fooled by his urgency and the false rain, flew in, all of them, and Anansi corked it shut. Thread by thread, web by web, Anansi delivered the impossible. Nyame, astonished and amused, kept his promise. He unlatched the golden box and released the stories to the world. From that moment forward, tales swirled like dust through markets and fields. Mothers sang them, elders passed them, children acted them out by firelight. And in every tale, no matter the lesson or laughter, somewhere, somehow, Anansi lurked. He did not keep them for himself, these stories. He gifted them, scattered them like seeds across continents and centuries. And so the tales travelled. Across oceans, through chains and exile, within lullabies and whispers. In every clever underdog, every trickster who wins through wit not war, every tale of upside-down justice, Anansi's thread gleams. Anansi's tales, though spun in the heart of West Africa, did not remain there. Like the spider himself, who danced between boundaries, crossed thresholds, and whispered truths through mischief, his stories travelled. But they did not journey on the wind or by choice. They were carried by human hands, bound in chains, by voices that refused to be silenced, by memory stitched into the marrow of those taken. As millions of Africans were stolen from their homelands and scattered across the Atlantic like seeds in a storm, Anansi went with them, not as a god, not even as a name always spoken aloud, but as a spirit curled inside survival itself. On plantations in the Caribbean, the Americas, and beyond, where cruelty ruled and language was stripped away like bark from a tree, the stories re-emerged. They slipped through cracks in overseers' commands, rose in the hush of night gatherings, and danced in the rhythms of drumless songs. In Jamaica, he became Anansi, still sly, still laughing, still cleverer than those who claimed power. In the American South, his spirit echoed in the tales of Brer Rabbit, another trickster, nimble and underestimated, who could twist any trap into a door. These were not just stories to pass time or entertain children. They were maps, they were mirrors, they were subtle resistance wrapped in riddles. When Anansi fooled a stronger opponent, listeners heard more than a tale. They heard hope. When he twisted a system against itself, they heard strategy. When he turned helplessness into a game he could win, they saw a reflection of their own resilience. In a world where brute force built empires, Anansi taught that cleverness could be power and that laughter could be an act of defiance. And it was laughter that kept Anansi alive. Not the hollow, forced chuckles of survival, but the deep, belly-warmed laughter that reminded people they were more than labor, more than statistics, more than sorrow. In the middle of long workdays under a punishing sun, Anansi's name might be muttered with a smile, a brief sparkle of joy. Around cooking fires or while braiding hair, the old stories would be retold, sometimes altered, sometimes sung, sometimes only hinted at. You know what Anansi would have done, someone would say, and eyes would glint, even if mouths stayed shut. Generations passed, and still Anansi lingered, not always in spider form. Sometimes he wore a new face, took a new name, but his essence remained, the one who flipped the script, who used his smallness as an advantage, who showed that stories could be sharper than swords. In West Africa, he remained a beloved trickster god. In the Caribbean, he evolved into a cultural hero, inspiring poets and playwrights alike. In the diaspora, he became a symbol, not just of African heritage, but of survival through imagination. Scholars studied him, educators taught him, children dressed as him for festivals. But even outside classrooms and books, he lived on, in the quick banter of comedians, in the lyrical cleverness of calypso, reggae, and rap, in the coded language of resistance movements that understood, sometimes the truth must wear a mask to survive. And now, dear dreamer, as you lie in the hush of night, you carry his story too. You may not feel the thread, but it's there, gossamer, golden, tying you to those who came before, to those who endured, to those who laughed even in the dark. Listen closely. Can you hear it? The soft clicking of spider legs along a wall, the whisper of silk catching moonlight, the chuckle just beyond the edge of sleep. That's Anansi, still weaving, still watching, still smiling. For though the body may tire, stories do not sleep. And Anansi, ever the dreamer's companion, ever the trickster spinning in shadow and light, will keep spinning so long as someone, somewhere, still believes that cleverness can outwit cruelty, and laughter can light even the darkest night. Once, in a land fogged with legend and song, there lived a boy who had no idea that kingship waited quietly in his hands. He was not born in a palace, nor cradled in robes of silk. He was raised by a foster father named Sir Ector, taught to clean armor and stoke fires, to observe knights rather than sit among them. The boy's name was Arthur, and though the world knew nothing of him, fate did. The land was restless. Britain, torn by wars and ambitions, needed a king. But not just any king. One worthy, one chosen by something deeper than bloodline or blade. And so, in a courtyard where nobles boasted and brawled, there stood a stone, and in that stone a sword buried to the hilt. Upon its surface words shimmered like frost at dawn. Whoso pulleth out this sword of this stone, and Anvil is rightwise king born of all England. Many tried. None succeeded. Arthur, still young and unnoticed, came not to try, but to fetch a sword for his foster brother, who had forgotten his own before a tournament. In his search he came upon the strange stone and the lonely sword, gleaming as if it waited only for him. With no audience, no fanfare, and no thought of grandeur, Arthur wrapped his hands around the hilt and pulled. The blade slid free as easily as breath on a mirror. At first, none believed it. Then they demanded he do it again, and each time the sword answered his hand, not theirs. Murmurs turned to wonder, wonder to whispers, whispers to a roar. The king has come. And so Arthur, once a page boy with dirt on his knees, rose not by force but by destiny. His throne would be Camelot. His crown not only of gold, but of ideals, justice, loyalty, courage, truth. A circle would be his legacy. Not a throne high above others, but a round table, where knights sat as equals. Each chair a vow, each knight a dream made flesh. Camelot became a beacon. From across the isles came warriors, visionaries and poets. Among them, Sir Lancelot, whose strength matched his sorrow, Sir Gawain, whose honour clashed with pride, Sir Percival, who sought the Grail not for glory but grace, and Queen Guinevere, whose love would one day stir the storm, but in the golden dawn her presence brought warmth to the halls and softness to the steel. They chased monsters, they defended the weak. They rode into forests where time curled sideways and magic sang through the leaves. Arthur welcomed challenges not with cruelty, but with code. Might was not right, right was right, and it must be defended, even at great cost. The court shone, bards sang, children played in streets that no longer feared tyrants. For a moment, brief, beautiful, like light touching dew, Camelot seemed to hold the world's promise in its hands. But the brightest tapestries are the first to fray, for even in Camelot hearts were human, and dreams, though strong, are delicate. Behind banners of valour, emotions stirred, love, jealousy, betrayal. A triangle formed, silent at first. Arthur, Lancelot, Guinevere. 3 hearts bound by loyalty and longing, by duty and the ache of something deeper. Still, Arthur led. Still, the round table stood. Still, the dream held. But fate had more stories to write. But even the brightest kingdoms eventually cast shadows. And in Camelot, the darkness came not from invading armies or distant kings, but from within. Love, when tangled with honour, becomes a difficult song to sing. And so it was with Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot. Whispers began like wind through leaves, soft, uncertain. But soon they became louder. The queen and the knight, eyes meeting too often, glances lingering like summer dusk. They loved Arthur, both of them, yet loved each other too. It was not plotted or cruel. It was simply human and tragic. Arthur knew. A king sees what others deny. But he said nothing, not out of weakness, but out of weariness. For how does one battle the ache of the heart without breaking it further? He carried the wound in silence, even as it bled into the fabric of his dream. His kingdom still stood, yet trembled under the weight of quiet betrayal. And then came Mordred. Some say he was Arthur's son by a half-sister, born not of love, but of fate's twisted hand. Others say he was a usurper, a whisperer in the shadows, who saw the fractures in Camelot and drove his wedge deeper. He was cold where Arthur was warm, ambitious where Arthur was just, and he believed the Round Table had grown soft with ideals. When Arthur left to confront Lancelot, forced at last by politics and pride, Mordred seized the throne. Declaring the king dead, he crowned himself and invited ruin in. The court split. The table that had once united the noble hearts of Britain cracked, splintered into factions and regrets. Arthur returned to reclaim what was his, not just a crown, but a code. He met Mordred at Camlan, a place where fate seemed to pause, breathless as swords clashed like thunder and cries echoed through the mist. It was not a battle of numbers, but of legacies. The stories say Arthur slew Mordred with a final thrust, even as Mordred drove his blade into Arthur's side. 2 wounds, one to each body, and one deeper still, to the dream itself. Bleeding and fading, Arthur ordered Excalibur, his sacred sword, cast into a lake. A knight obeyed, though not at first. The blade, when finally thrown, did not sink. A hand rose from the waters, pale and gloved in mystery, and caught it. The lake received the king's final offering. Arthur, too weak to remain, was taken away, not to a tomb, but to a boat. On the shores of Avalon, robed women awaited. Some say they were sorceresses. Others say they were dreams themselves. They bore him to that quiet isle where time moves differently, or not at all. Did he die? No one is certain. Some believe he sleeps still beneath the hills, sword by his side, crown at rest, waiting for Britain to need him again. For a time when ideals flicker once more like candles in the dark, when kings are chosen not by birth, but by their care for justice. The tale of Arthur never truly ends. That is why it lingers. In the hush between dusk and dawn, in the tales told beside firelight, in the unbroken circle of a table where every voice matters, and in dreams, where you might one day find yourself in a misty field, a sword half buried in stone before you, and the soft whisper of destiny calling your name. Shall we drift now, dear dreamer, into the next legend? In the highlands of ancient Mesoamerica, where temples brushed the clouds and obsidian stars mirrored the constellations of the gods, there came a being who was neither fully beast nor man, neither wholly divine nor bound to earth. He was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a creature of paradox and poetry. His form slithered and soared, a serpent's grace wrapped in the brilliance of birds' plumage, and his name would echo across generations, carved into temple stones and whispered in firelit chants. Quetzalcoatl was said to be born of the primordial womb, a cosmic union of duality and balance. Where others embodied war, blood, and fire, Quetzalcoatl emerged as a god of learning, of breath, of wind that carried both storm and song. It was he who taught humanity the arts, of agriculture and medicine, of calendars and morality. Where blood spilled to feed the sun, Quetzalcoatl sought to nourish the soul. But to create man, sacrifice was necessary. And so the god descended into Mictlan, the realm of the dead. Cloaked not in arrogance but in courage, he ventured through its 9 grueling levels. There, in shadowed stillness, he found the bones of prior worlds, the remnants of earlier creations long dissolved. He gathered these sacred relics of time and, bleeding from his own divine essence, sprinkled his lifeblood upon them. In doing so, he seeded humanity anew, not fashioned by command, but awakened by sacrifice. His breath became wind, his words knowledge. He gifted the maize, the quill, the stars mapped in sacred order. Among the pantheon of Aztec gods, who often thirsted for war, Quetzalcoatl was the rare god who dreamed of peace. And yet, dreams rarely go unchallenged. In the heavens above and temples below, not all were pleased by Quetzalcoatl's devotion to balance and creation. Tezcatlipoca, the god of night, sorcery, and conflict, cast a jealous eye upon his brother. Where Quetzalcoatl brought structure, Tezcatlipoca sowed chaos. Theirs was a dance not of partners, but of opposites, locked in eternal rivalry. The stories differ in their details, like reflections in shifting water, but the essence remains the same. Tezcatlipoca tricked the feathered serpent. Some say it was through a mirror, obsidian and cruel, that showed Quetzalcoatl not his greatness, but his pride. Others whisper of an enchanted brew, a pulque potion, intoxicating and thick with illusion. Under its haze, Quetzalcoatl, pure and purposeful, stumbled. He faltered, and in that brief lapse, shame rooted itself in his heart. Awakening to what he believed was disgrace, he could no longer face the heavens. The god of light felt darkness bloom within him. So he burned. He built his own pyre upon the coast, flames dancing like serpents against the twilight. And from the fire, his ashes rose, not in silence, but in transformation. As the flames consumed his mortal shell, Quetzalcoatl became the morning star, Tlahuizcalpantecutli, a beacon to sailors, farmers, and poets alike. He did not die. He changed. But before his departure, a vow was spoken. Quetzalcoatl promised he would return, on a raft of snakes, or clouds, or wind, to reclaim what was lost. This prophecy, weightless yet heavy, drifted into the bones of the Aztec people. It slept in their calendars, stirred in their rituals, and watched from behind masks during sacred festivals. The god who gave them life might one day return to walk among them once more. And so the feathered serpent left not with a roar, but with a whisper, not vanquished, but waiting. Centuries passed, and the memory of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the god of breath and wisdom, settled deep into the roots of the land. His story was carved into the stones of temples, danced into festivals, and whispered into the ears of children as they drifted to sleep beside firelight. Always there remained the prophecy, soft but ever present, that one day he would return from the east, cloaked in clouds or feathers or stars, bringing wisdom, justice, or judgment. And then came the ships. They appeared not from myth, but from ocean mist, tall, white-sailed beasts, unlike anything the Mexica had seen before. In the year 1519, as foretold in sacred cycles, the strangers arrived from the east, just as the prophecy had said. They came not on wind or feathered rafts, but on wooden ships bristling with steel, thunder, and ambition. At their head was Hernán Cortés, not a god, but a man who knew how to wear one's shadow like armor. The coincidence of the calendar was haunting. The Aztec calendar had just begun the cycle that aligned with the foretold return of Quetzalcoatl, the Seacatl year. Cortés's arrival during this sacred time rippled through the empire like a gust through feathers. Montezuma, the emperor of Tenochtitlan, heard the reports with troubled eyes. Pale-skinned men in strange garments, bearing foreign animals and fire weapons, claiming strange powers. It was no ordinary encounter. And so, amid doubt and reverence, he welcomed them not as enemies, but perhaps, just perhaps, as gods. This mistake, This beautiful, fatal fusion of prophecy and misunderstanding changed the world. Cortés, keen and calculating, accepted the offerings. Gold, food, tribute, they flowed like rivers from Montezuma's court to the Spaniards' hands. But where Quetzalcoatl brought knowledge, these men brought conquest. Where he sacrificed himself to create life, they sacrificed others to seize it. And where the feathered serpent sought peace and rebirth, these newcomers sought dominion, wealth, and empire. Soon the temples ran not with sacred paint, but with blood. The empire faltered under the weight of disease, betrayal, and steel. The gods did not rise to protect their people, or if they did, their voices were drowned in cannon fire and falling stone. And yet, through the dust of destruction and the ash of empire, Quetzalcoatl's legend did not die. It transformed. Some said his spirit had left once again, unable to bear the ruin of what he had once nurtured. Others believed he had tried to return, but was slain in ignorance by those who could no longer recognize their own myths. This, then, was the tragedy of Quetzalcoatl. Not merely that he left, or that he fell, but that his return came misread. A myth meeting empire, poetry meeting muskets, trust meeting treachery. His name became both a memory and a wound. Yet across the centuries he remains, not as a lost god, but as a question whispered through history. What if a dream had returned? But no one remembered how to dream. Now, dear dreamer, let us drift from the noise of conquest to a quieter moment, not of fire and steel, but of wind and sky. Picture the twilight winds sweeping gently through the high valleys of old Tenochtitlan. The lake mirrors the last blush of sun, and somewhere, unseen, feathers glide, soft, iridescent, timeless. No armies march here. No voices cry out, only the hush of water and the slow spiral descent of a single plume, drifting like a promise not yet forgotten. The stars emerge one by one, like ancient glyphs returning to the sky. You are not standing beneath them, but floating, as if borne on Quetzalcoatl's breath itself. Your worries dissolve into mist. Your thoughts curl into the air like incense. Let go now. Let the past be past, and the prophecy sleep a little longer. No serpents tonight, no sacrifice. Only feathers drifting through twilight winds, as soft as leaves on water. Breathe in, breathe out. The feathered serpent watches, not in judgment, but in stillness. You are safe, you are starlit, you are floating. Good night. In the dense woods of ancient Slavic lands, where birch trees whispered secrets and pine needles carpeted the earth in silence, there lived a figure of myth and riddle, Baba Yaga. Neither wholly good nor entirely evil, she was a being born of the wild places, as old as the wind and as unpredictable as the storms that crept through the forest at dusk. To the lost traveler, she might appear as a savior or a sentence. To the brave, perhaps a test, and to the foolish, a final lesson. She was described as ancient, her back hunched like the arch of an old tree, with a nose so long it touched the ceiling when she slept. Her eyes glowed with the cunning of centuries, and her voice creaked like frozen branches in winter. Her teeth, some iron, some bone, flashed like truth in a world of riddles. And her home? Ah, her home was no ordinary cottage. It stood on chicken legs, tall and yellowed, scratching at the earth, turning to face strangers who dared approach. It spun and danced when commanded, a grotesque ballet on clawed stilts. Baba Yaga was feared, yes, but not simply out of terror. She was respected, even sought out, by those in need of answers that could not be found in any book or temple. She could grant knowledge, bestow magical gifts, even save a life. But all came at a cost, and the currency was never gold. Sometimes it was a riddle answered, sometimes a truth confessed, and sometimes a soul swallowed whole. Many tales survive of children who stumbled into her forest. Some were eaten, of course, boiled, baked, or stewed, for Baba Yaga was never one to waste ingredients. But others were given tasks, impossible trials that tested wit, heart, and humility. Fetch fire without touching it. Sort a roomful of seeds in a single night. Ride through the forest without leaving a single footprint. Those who succeeded returned wiser, transformed, forever marked by their time in her realm. Those who failed were never seen again, unless, of course, their bones were glimpsed in the fence of skulls that surrounded her dancing house. Her mode of travel was as strange as she herself. Baba Yaga flew not on a broomstick, but in a mortar, a great stone bowl, which she rode like a thundercloud. With one hand she steered it using a pestle, and with the other she swept away her tracks with a broom made of silver birch. The sound of her passage was a low rumble, like a storm rolling over the canopy. Birds fled, wolves went silent, and the trees themselves seemed to lean back in wary deference. And yet, in this strange dance of darkness and favour, there was always a strange balance. For those pure of heart, respectful in word, and sharp in thought, Baba Yaga might offer a key, a flame, a truth. But for those who mocked the old ways or dared to steal from her, there was no mercy, only hunger. She was not a villain to be vanquished, nor a saint to be worshipped. Baba Yaga was a force, of nature, of fate, of ancient wisdom wrapped in warts and whispers. And if one listens closely, in the rustle of the leaves or the creak of the trees, one might hear the laughter of the forest's oldest witch, still riding her mortar between the trunks, her house still dancing in some hidden glade, waiting for the next fool, the next hero, the next tale to begin. Sleep now, dear dreamer. The wind is settling. The forest holds its breath. The hut has not yet turned to face you. Not yet. But if it does, will you be ready? The crooked forest stretched endlessly, its boughs arching like the ribs of some long-dead beast, creaking in the wind's whisper. Deep within that ancient green stood a hut atop two enormous chicken legs, pacing in slow, thoughtful circles, as though pondering the world itself. Baba Yaga was watching. She always watched. Many heroes had come to her, young warriors, curious maidens, desperate parents. They arrived with trembling voices and trembling hands, bearing no swords or shields, but questions and fears, each hoping to pass the strange trials that guarded her wisdom. For Baba Yaga did not give answers freely. No, she demanded something more sacred than bravery. She demanded understanding. One such visitor was a boy named Luca. His village suffered a blight, crops withering, water turning bitter. The elders, too afraid to face the witch, whispered the tale. If you seek Baba Yaga's help, she may help, or she may eat you. Luca, with a heart bigger than his years, walked alone through the forest, braving tangled roots and sudden storms until the hut appeared. The door opened not with welcome, but with a riddle. What runs but never tires, speaks but has no tongue? Luca paused, sweat beading on his brow. The trees around him seemed to lean in closer, curious to see if he'd fail. Then he whispered, "A river." The door creaked wider. Inside, Baba Yaga sat on a bench of bones, stirring a pot that bubbled without fire. Her eyes were two black moons, full of storms and memory. She asked no further questions with words, but her gaze posed 100 more. "You want life for your village," she said, "but have you earned it?" She sent him on a task, not to slay a beast or steal treasure, but to tend the grave of a forgotten soldier in the woods. No reward, no glory, only care and silence. When Luca returned, dirt under his nails and flowers in his hand, the hut groaned approval. "You have passed," Baba Yaga said, "not because you were clever, but because you were kind." So it was for many who found her. She asked riddles, yes, but her true tests were of character. Would-be heroes were told to fetch water with broken buckets, to navigate mazes that changed with their moods, to carry fire without burning what they loved. Those who raged failed. Those who thought and felt returned wiser, lighter. Some said she changed shape, sometimes an old crone, sometimes a mother, sometimes a shadow with long teeth. But no matter her face, her purpose remained. She taught those who dared to ask, not with mercy, but with truth. And when her hut stopped pacing and settled at last onto the mossy earth, silence folded over the forest like a velvet curtain. Baba Yaga, now a silhouette against the fire's dim glow, hummed a lullaby too old for words. The trees swayed with it, and the stars blinked slowly above. Somewhere in a dream, a child repeats her riddle, wondering what answer it holds. Somewhere, a grown warrior wakes with new wisdom. And here, in this moment, you are safe. Let the forest cradle your thoughts. Let her hut be the boundary between questions and answers, and let the humming lead you gently away. Sleep now, dear dreamer. The hut watches, but it does not follow, and the forest will keep your secrets until morning. Far across the waves, beyond the horizon where the sun kisses the sea, lies a realm whispered of in the chants of Polynesia, carried in the rhythm of tides and remembered in the curve of a conch shell's song. Here, under canopies of swaying palms and above oceans deep with mystery, lived Maui, the demigod of mischief, of might, of endless daring. Neither wholly god nor fully man, Maui was born of the union between heaven and earth, gifted with a mortal's hunger for wonder and a divine strength to shape it. From the day of his birth, Maui was unlike his brothers. While they toiled and trained, content with the simplicity of village life, Maui watched the stars and listened to the secrets of the wind. He was carved from curiosity, mischievous and brilliant, with eyes that sparkled like volcanic glass, and a laugh that echoed through valleys like the chime of a stone skipping water. In his hand, he bore a magical fishhook, forged by the gods, blessed by the ancients, and tempered in the fires of challenge. This was no ordinary tool. With it, Maui could wrestle the sun, tame the winds, and stir the depths of the ocean itself. It is said that Maui often felt the world too small for his spirit. He longed to change it, to expand it, to bring glory not only to himself, but to his people. One day, as he sat beside his brothers and their canoe, watching them drop their lines into the deep, a thought struck him. What if more land could rise from the sea? What if there were new islands for his people to live upon, to explore, to call home? His brothers laughed at the idea, dismissing it as one of Maui's passing fantasies. But Maui did not laugh. He only smiled. One night, as the stars shimmered over still waters, Maui summoned his brothers once more to the sea. He spoke little, merely instructing them to paddle their canoe, far beyond the sight of the shore. Reluctantly, they obeyed, their paddles slicing through dark, moonlit waves. Maui waited until the waters grew quiet and the sky stretched wide, unbroken. Then he stood tall in the canoe, uncoiling the line from his fishhook and cast it into the abyss. He whispered chants of old, calling upon the ocean's spirits, the land gods sleeping below, and the memory of his ancestors. The line stretched deep, deeper than the brothers could imagine, until it hooked something immense, ancient, and unmoving. Maui's muscles tensed. He braced himself, dug his heels into the wood of the canoe, and pulled. The sea began to boil. Waves crashed against the canoe as if the ocean itself resisted. But Maui's grip did not falter. Inch by inch, he heaved. The fishhook held firm, and from the water the earth groaned and rose. Mountains breached the surface. Valleys stretched. Rivers dreamed of their courses. One by one, islands emerged from the dark embrace of the sea, like sleeping giants woken by Maui's will. His brothers watched in awe and terror, holding the canoe steady, mouths open but voiceless against the roar of creation. When it was done, when the final island had found the sky, Maui turned to them with a grin, his brow glistening, his breath even. "Do not look back," he said. "Let these lands rise untouched." But curiosity, ever Maui's cousin, claimed them. One brother glanced behind, and then another. The spell wavered. The new land cracked and twisted, breaking into the shapes we now know as New Zealand. Its jagged coastlines, its winding ridges, its scattered peaks, a testimony not to perfection, but to the flaw of human nature. Even so, the islands remained. Maui had done it. He had fished up the world. And to this day, in the stories sung by Polynesian elders, in the carvings etched into temple wood, and in the hearts of children who trace the ocean's edge with their bare feet, Maui lives. His fishhook is seen in the curve of a crescent moon. His laughter rides the wind through palm leaves, and the islands, vast and vibrant, lie proof of his boldness, his magic, and his unquenchable desire to make the world more than it was. So rest now, dear dreamer, with waves whispering Maui's name. The sea has secrets still, and the fishhook waits in myth, ever ready, should another soul dare to pull new wonders from the deep. But even the brightest flames flicker before the end, and Maui, demigod of the Pacific, lifter of islands, bringer of fire, was not immune to the pull of the final mystery, death. Having defied so many limits of the human world, he turned his restless gaze to the one boundary none had yet crossed. It was not enough to shape the land or tame the heavens. Maui wished to gift his people immortality, not through elixirs or prayers, but by cunning, by slipping past death itself and locking the door behind him. Maui's plan was whispered on winds and carved into canoe paddles. He would enter the womb of Hinenui Tepo, the goddess of night and death, and pass through her body as a lizard or worm, exiting through her mouth, thus reversing the cycle of life and stripping death of its dominion over mankind. If he succeeded, no one would die again. If he failed, he would be the lesson. The night of the attempt was moonless. Maui stood at the threshold of the goddess's sacred resting place, his magic fishhook strapped to his back, a cloak of shifting shadows wrapped around him. Around him were birds, his loyal companions, Tiwakawaka, the fantail, among them, who fluttered nervously as Maui began his transformation. Shrinking down, he crept like a night serpent into the slumbering giantess's body, beginning the journey few could imagine and none had dared. But Tiwakawaka, playful, easily amused, could not hold his silence. As Maui approached the threshold of her lips, the bird giggled. It was a light, high-pitched laugh, like wind skipping across still water. Yet even that faint mirth awoke Hainenui Tepo. Her eyes opened wide as the void, and with a single flex of her divine being, she crushed Maui inside her, ending his quest in an instant. It is said that the land trembled and the sea sighed. The birds scattered. The stars above blinked a moment longer and then resumed their ancient gaze, and thus death remained. No demigod, however clever, could undo its laws. Maui's people mourned, not just for the hero who fished up their islands, who lassoed the sun to slow its passage across the sky, but for the dream he carried with him. The dream that death might be bested, just as all other forces had been. Yet in the stories that flowed from island to island like warm tides, Maui was never remembered as a fool. He was remembered as bold, audacious, unafraid, a trickster not only of men, but of fate itself. His death did not diminish his legend, it crystallized it. He had dared to walk where none had tread. And for generations after, parents would hush children with tales of Maui's last challenge, and elders would nod at sunsets and whisper, "Even Maui met his end." And so, dear dreamer, if you find yourself chasing the wind, tugging at the edge of what is and what could be, know you are not alone. Somewhere, in the deep fold of time and tale, Maui smiles still, his fishhook aglow in starlight, pulling at the fabric of the world. In the city of Uruk, ancient and proud, where ziggurats rose like mountains and the Euphrates whispered lullabies to the stone, there lived a king unlike any other, Gilgamesh. He was 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal, a paradox carved in flesh. His strength was unmatched, his will relentless, his heart ruled by pride and thirst for glory. Gilgamesh was not merely a ruler, he was a force, a tempest cloaked in royal robes, but for all his greatness, Gilgamesh was feared. His people, though awed by his might, cried out to the gods for relief. He wore down the young with endless labors and took what he pleased, unchecked and unchallenged. So the gods, in their cosmic wisdom, shaped a counterweight, a wild man named Enkidu, born of clay and chaos, roaming the wilderness with the gazelles. Enkidu was the untamed answer to tyranny, a mirror to Gilgamesh's might. He knew no cities, no laws, only the song of the wind and the language of beasts. But fate would not let such opposites remain apart. Through the temptations of civilization, bread, beer, and a temple priestess named Shamhat, Enkidu was drawn into the world of men. He learned speech, clothed himself, and walked into Uruk, where destiny awaited. The first meeting of Gilgamesh and Enkidu shook the streets. They wrestled like gods crashing into the earth, equal in strength and fire. The city held its breath as walls trembled and fountains cracked until the battle stilled, not with victory or defeat, but with laughter. For in their struggle they found not enemies, but equals. Enkidu had tamed the tyrant. Gilgamesh had met his match. From that day forth, they were inseparable. Brothers not by blood, but by fate, they embarked on quests to carve their names into time. Together they sought to slay Humbaba, the monstrous guardian of the cedar forest, a being whose breath scorched and whose roar bent trees. With courage forged in friendship, they faced the beast and felled him, claiming glory and lumber for Uruk. Then came the Bull of Heaven, sent by a scorned goddess to punish Gilgamesh. But again the brothers prevailed, slaying the divine beast and staining the sky with rebellion. Yet the gods do not tolerate defiance without price. They chose Enkidu to pay the cost. The wild man fell ill, cursed and withering, his laughter fading into fever. Gilgamesh watched helplessly as his other half, his reflection, was pulled into death's embrace. Enkidu's last breath left a void so deep it echoed across the cosmos. Grief shattered Gilgamesh. The king who had mocked death now feared it. If even Enkidu, the fearless, the beloved, could die, then what awaited him? With sandals torn and beard unshaven, Gilgamesh wandered the edges of the world, seeking the secret of immortality. His journey led him to the ends of the earth, to the deep sea where Utnapishtim lived, the one mortal granted eternal life by the gods. He faced scorpion men and traversed the road of the sun, where light burned truth into the soul. He crossed waters of death, met the ancient survivor of the great flood, and learned the story of endings and renewal. Utnapishtim, old as time, saw the sorrow in the king and offered a test to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. But Gilgamesh, mortal still, succumbed to sleep, proving that death was not a curse, but a nature. And yet not all was lost. A plant, hidden in the deep, promised renewal. Gilgamesh found it, a chance to share youth with his people. But while he bathed, a snake stole it, shedding its skin and slithering into eternity. Thus, the secret was lost, and Gilgamesh returned to Uruk, not immortal, but wiser. He looked upon his city's walls, high and enduring, and saw what he had built, what would outlast flesh. Immortality, he realized, lived not in the body, but in the tale. And so his story, etched in cuneiform and whispered through millennia, still lives on. The legend of a king who dared to defy death and found, instead, the meaning of life. When the silence of grief settled over the mighty Gilgamesh after the death of Enkidu, it was as if the wind had been taken from the sails of his spirit. The echo of their laughter no longer filled the gardens of Uruk. The strength in his arms remained, but it carried no joy, no lightness. His brother was gone, swallowed by the final silence that even kings could not command. And so began the journey that would stretch across the edges of the known world, a quest not for conquest, but for answers. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, lion among men, set forth in search of something no warrior had ever won: immortality. Driven by dread, haunted by dreams, Gilgamesh crossed deserts that shimmered with heat like illusions, wandered through forests where the trees whispered of endings, and descended into valleys where shadows clung to the ground like regret. His feet bled, his royal robes tattered, but he pressed forward, a figure carved by sorrow and driven by longing. He sought Utnapishtim, the one man who had survived the great flood and been granted eternal life by the gods. His path led him to the twin-peaked mountain of Mashu, where the sun rose and set through great stone gates guarded by scorpion men. Their eyes, bright with the wisdom of stars, watched him approach with awe and caution. They saw not just a man, but a soul scorched by loss. They let him pass, and for 12 leagues of darkness, Gilgamesh walked a tunnel where light could not reach, only emerging into a garden of jewels, trees hung with crystal leaves, vines bearing emerald fruit, flowers that glowed with amethyst fire. There he met Siduri, the alewife of the edge of the world, who offered him wine and caution. "Why chase what the gods have denied?" she asked, her voice like sea foam. "Live, Gilgamesh. Love. Find joy in your days. That is the gift the gods have left to men." But Gilgamesh, unswayed, begged passage across the waters of death, and with the help of Urshanabi the boatman, he sailed to the dwelling of Utnapishtim. The Ancient One received him like a fading echo. Utnapishtim, whose eyes had watched the seas rise and fall over ages, told the tale of the flood, of divine wrath and survival, of loss and divine mercy. But even he, granted eternal breath, warned Gilgamesh that life without end was not life as men knew it. It was stasis, stillness, the absence of change, and thus the absence of meaning. Yet compassion stirred in Utnapishtim. He revealed a secret, a plant that grew at the bottom of the deep waters, a thorny bloom of rejuvenation, capable of restoring youth. Hope rekindled, Gilgamesh dove into the waters and through courage and determination retrieved the plant. Holding it close, he began the journey home, dreaming of giving the gift to the elders of Uruk, to turn back the clock for his people, to rewrite the fate of flesh. But while he rested by a cool spring, his armor removed, his hands soft with trust, a snake slithered from the reeds. Drawn by the scent, it coiled around the precious bloom and swallowed it whole. In its wake, it shed its skin and slinked away, reborn. Gilgamesh awoke to emptiness. The plant was gone, its promise stolen, its power lost. He did not rage, he did not weep. He stood barefoot and quiet and watched the sun ripple on the water. There he understood. Immortality was not for him nor for any man, but something else lingered. Wisdom. The journey had not been wasted. In the seeking, he had found something greater than eternal life. He had found the weight of time, the treasure of moments. He returned to Uruk not as the conqueror of death, but as its student. He looked upon the great walls his hands had helped build, the temples that reached skyward, the children laughing in courtyards, and he smiled. His name would echo not because he lived forever, but because he had lived fully. So sleep now, dear dreamer. Let Gilgamesh's weary journey remind you that it is not the absence of endings that gives life meaning, but the presence of moments worth remembering. Let the whisper of rivers and the hush of ancient sands lull you. Rest in the knowledge that wisdom often grows where immortality cannot. In a time when the earth was still young and emperors sought immortality more than justice, there lived a woman whose story would become one of the most enduring legends in all of China. Her name was Chang'e, graceful, radiant, and quiet as moonlight. Hers is not a tale of conquest or glory, but of love, sacrifice, and solitude that hangs softly in the sky like a lantern at dusk. Chang'e's tale begins with her husband, Hou Yi, the famed archer. He was a man of strength and nobility, known across the land for saving the world when 10 suns once blazed in the sky, scorching the earth. With his great bow, he shot down 9 of them, leaving just one to give warmth without burning the world to cinders. As a reward, he was granted an elixir, a potion of immortality that could raise him beyond mortal bounds. But Hou Yi, though honored, hesitated. Immortality without Chang'e would be an eternal loneliness, and so he brought the potion home and placed it in safe keeping. Yet the gods were not the only ones who hungered for forever. Word of the potion spread like wildfire through wind-whispered rumors, reaching the ears of those who would take rather than earn. One such man, a treacherous apprentice of Hou Yi, crept into their home one night with greed burning in his chest. He sought to steal the elixir and leave the world behind. Chang'e, discovering the plot, knew there was no time to fight, no hero nearby to save her. She faced a moment of impossible choice. With quiet resolve and trembling hands, she drank the elixir herself, not for immortality, but to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. At once, her body grew light, the earth slipping from her feet like mist. She floated higher and higher, past rooftops, over mountain tops, through the cloud-thin air, until she reached the moon. And there, in the quiet hush of the lunar realm, she stayed. On the moon, Chang'e found herself accompanied only by the jade rabbit, a celestial creature who, in some tellings, came to her out of compassion and in others was already there, pounding herbs in a mortar for the gods. The rabbit never speaks, but its silent presence is a comfort, a soft rhythm to days without time. Together they live in a palace of cold beauty, where silence is eternal and the stars blink like distant candle flames. Chang'e looks down upon the earth she left behind. She watches the turning of seasons, the sweep of clouds, the flicker of lanterns during the mid-autumn festival. In those moments, when families gather to eat mooncakes and light lanterns, they remember her. Some whisper prayers to her for love, for reunions, for the ones who are far away. And though she cannot answer in words, Chang'e glows a little brighter. Her story has endured through dynasties and wars, in poetry and song, in the gaze of every child staring up at the full moon. She is not forgotten. She is the luminous sorrow and silent strength that lives in separation. A sacrifice made not for self, but for protection. A woman who gave up everything and, in doing so, became part of the sky. Now, dreamer, let your breath slow. Picture the moon overhead, not empty, but inhabited. A woman in flowing robes, hair like dark silk, sits beside a rabbit beneath a cinnamon tree. Their silence is not loneliness, but stillness. Her gaze, though distant, is kind. And as you drift deeper into sleep, know that even in isolation, even in sacrifice, there is beauty, there is peace, there is light that never leaves. As generations passed, the legend of Chang'e became more than a myth. It became a ritual, a rhythm, a quiet promise whispered under autumn skies. In every village and city across China, when the moon grows full in the 8th month of the lunar calendar, families gather not just to feast, but to remember. The mid-autumn festival, glowing with candlelight and heavy with sweet fragrance, carries her memory like the tide carries light. Children gaze upward, scanning the sky for the outline of the moon goddess, while parents slice mooncakes, dense with lotus seed paste or red bean, stamped with symbols of longevity, unity, or love. The roundness of the mooncake is not just culinary, it is cosmic. It mirrors the full moon above, whole and unbroken, a circle of reunion. And at the center of this ritual stands the quiet silhouette of Chang'e, watching gently from her celestial perch, accompanied by the jade rabbit as he pounds herbs of immortality beneath the cassia tree. In the quiet moments after the lanterns are lit, those paper orbs of orange and gold, drifting gently in the breeze or glowing like stars tethered to bamboo poles, children make their wishes. They whisper them skyward, unsure whether they are prayers or poetry. Some wish for health, others for good harvests or peace in the home, and a few dream of touching the moon itself. In this ritual, Chang'e is not a distant, cold figure. She is a listener, a keeper of longings, a mother of solitude. The lanterns themselves become her voice, gliding silently across rivers or hanging from eaves, carrying warmth through the darkness. Some are shaped like lotuses, others like animals, dragons or phoenixes, but they all carry the same glow. That gentle firelight becomes the heartbeat of the night, as if the world is lit from within by a memory too sacred to fade. Teachers and storytellers retell her myth in schools and temples, at kitchen tables and on rooftops. They speak of her choice, the sacrifice, the loneliness, the grace. Not everyone agrees on every detail of the legend. In some versions, she is selfish. In others, she is saintly. But all versions agree on one thing. She is there, constant, luminous, watching over a world that changes and repeats and remembers. The moon becomes a mirror, and in it, each person sees their own story reflected: loss, longing, loyalty. As the glow bathes courtyards and quiet fields, it is not just the light of the moon that touches the skin. It is the hush of a story older than memory, gentle as a lullaby. So, as the lanterns sway and the night deepens, close your eyes, dear dreamer. Let the scent of mooncakes, the laughter of children, and the gentle rhythm of festival drums settle around you like mist. You are not alone in your dreaming. Somewhere above, the moon floats steady, and in it a woman watches, not in sorrow, but in silence, not in exile, but in eternal presence. Let your breath move with hers. Let your thoughts flicker like lanterns. And as your own dreams begin to glow, know that you too are part of a tale whispered from earth to sky, an echo carried in the quiet light of Chang'e. Long before the emerald hills of Ulster trembled beneath the march of warriors, long before steel and shield echoed through the misty glens, there was a boy, not yet a legend, not yet a storm. His name was Siddhartha, and he was quick-footed and wide-eyed, with a laugh that rode the wind like a kestrel and a courage too big for his age. He was not born into greatness, but greatness, it seemed, was already waiting for him. One evening, the boy followed his uncle Conchobar, the king of Ulster, to a feast at the house of the blacksmith Chulainn. He was invited too, but arrived late. So late that Chulainn, not knowing he was still to come, released his massive guard hound to protect the estate. The hound was no mere pet. It was a creature of feral strength, bred for war and unyielding to fear. As Siddhartha approached, the beast lunged, but the boy did not scream or flee. He stood firm, small, focused, and suddenly aflame with purpose. With a single graceful strike of his hurley and ball, he slew the beast that even warriors feared. There was silence, the kind that feels like snow falling through the air. Then came the weight of what had been done. Chulainn mourned the hound, not just its strength, but its symbolism, its loyalty, its irreplaceability. But the boy, without pause or protest, offered a vow. Until another dog could be raised and trained, he would take its place. He would guard the blacksmith's home with his own life. He would become the hound of Chulainn, Chulainn, and so a name was forged in promise and blood. Chulainn was no longer just a boy with a fierce heart. He was bound to something older, something feral. And legends, once begun, do not sit still. To sharpen his strength, he sought out Scathach, the shadowy warrior woman of Skye. She was a figure wrapped in fog and myth, dwelling in a land where the sea moaned against broken cliffs, and every footstep felt like trespass. There, in that land between storm and silence, she trained him, taught him to move like the wind, to strike like lightning, to see the rhythm of battle not as chaos, but as music. From her he received the Gai Bolg, a barbed spear of death thrown with the foot and impossible to remove once embedded. From her he learned how to be a storm and not be broken by it. But there was something more within him, something that no training could quite contain. It was called the Riastrad, the warp spasm. In battle, It overtook him like a tide overtakes a beach. Bones twisted, muscles swelled, one eye sucked inward while the other bulged outward. His body changed into something terrible and beautiful, unrecognizable even to his closest companions. He became a creature of pure wrath, a one-man tempest, and in those moments even the bravest warriors felt a tremor of fear. Not because he had lost himself, but because he had become fully himself, a vessel of divine fury. The tales say his hair stood on end like a crown of spears. Blood and fire danced around him. His voice became a shriek that startled birds from trees and curdled milk in its pails. This was not the madness of a berserker. It was the unveiling of a mythic truth. In the warp spasm, Chulainn was the boundary between man and God, between child and legend, between Ulster and the grave. Yet for all the battles he won, for all the foes he felled, the stories never forget his youth. He was always too young for the sorrow he carried, too young to bear the weight of prophecy, of fame, of war. His eyes were the eyes of someone who had seen too much, and yet still longed for peace. Even in rest, his presence was electric, a sword nearby, his hand always ready. The air around him shimmered like heat rising off stones. And still, behind the legend, the boy who offered to be a guard dog lingered, the one who kept his promises, who walked toward danger not for glory, but because it was the right thing to do. Soon, that storm would meet its end. But not yet. Not tonight. Let the mist thicken now around the moors of Ulster. Let your thoughts quiet as the waves lap gently on distant shores. We are not yet at the end of the tale. Rest now, dreamer, for in the next hush, Chulainn takes his final stand. There comes a moment in every legend's arc when the tide turns, when the roar of youth gives way to the hush of twilight, and even storms must find a place to settle. For Chulainn, the boy who became a tempest, that moment arrived not with a quiet slipping into old age, but with a battle that shook the earth one final time. The land had grown restless. Ulster's enemies, long held at bay by the fury of its hound, saw their chance when the warrior stood alone, wounded, weary, and already marked by omens. Chulainn had always known his fate. Prophecies clung to his name like dew on heather, that his life would be short, his glory unmatched, and that he would die not lying down, but upright, unbowed and watching. The tale begins in a field flushed gold with evening. The enemies of Ulster massed on one side, their eyes cautious, for even now, injured, pale, and thinned by war, he stood like a flame refusing to gutter out. His faithful charioteer, Yaga, begged him to turn back. "You've given them enough," he whispered. But Chulainn shook his head, the last of his wild mane falling across a brow beaded with sweat. He had one promise left to keep, not to a person, but to a place. Ulster would not see its protector fall on his knees. With the last strength in his bones, he searched the field until he found it, a tall grey stone jutting from the earth like a sentinel. There, beneath a tree whose branches whispered with wind and memory, he tied himself upright with the leather straps of his shield. Not with fear, not with surrender, but with resolve. If death was to come, it would come looking him in the eye. And so he waited. Hours passed. Crows circled but did not dare descend. Warriors approached but dared not strike. For how could one be sure he was dead when his eyes still blazed, when his fingers still gripped the hilt of his sword, when the wind still seemed to bend around him as though he commanded even that? It is said he stood there for 3 days, and none dared touch him. At last, a raven, the dark-winged herald of the Morrigan, the goddess of fate and death, landed upon his shoulder. Only then did his enemies draw close. Only then did they dare believe the storm had passed. Only then did they move to strike, cautiously, reverently, like men approaching a shrine rather than a corpse. But even in death, he did not fall. His body, bound upright, remained as it had in life, defiant, proud, eternal. And so, the legend of the boy who became a hound, who became a storm, who became a symbol, came to rest not in surrender, but in vigil. His enemies said he died facing them. Ulster said he never truly died at all. Now, dear dreamer, let that image linger. A hero tied to the earth, spine like iron, spirit like thunder. Let the wind that rustles your curtains be the wind that once passed over the battlefields of air. Let the hush between your breaths carry his name, softly, like a chant in the dark. Chulainn stands no more, but somewhere the stone still holds the shape of his back. Sleep now. The storm has passed. Long ago, under the gentle curve of the Himalayan foothills, there was a prince born not amidst war or prophecy, but within the silken walls of peace and splendor. His name was Siddhartha Gautama, and from his first breath, it was said the stars leaned closer to watch. His father, King Shuddadana, ruled a prosperous kingdom in Kapilavastu, and vowed to shield his son from all sorrow, all sickness, all signs of the world's impermanence. No old age, no death, no decay, only youth, laughter, and rose-scented breezes through golden halls. Siddhartha grew among fountains and music, garlanded with jewels and surrounded by dancers. Gardens bloomed where he walked. Musicians followed him with lutes tuned to his breath. Yet even as he smiled, something stirred beneath the surface, an ache without name, like a door slightly ajar to a wind no one else could feel. One day, with permission to ride beyond the palace gates, the prince encountered something his sheltered life had never shown him, an old man, bent and trembling. Later, a sick man coughing against the earth, and then a corpse, still and cold, wrapped for the pyre. The golden veil his father had drawn was torn aside by these encounters. How could joy last, Siddhartha wondered, when all things withered and died? In time, he saw a fourth figure, a wandering ascetic, calm and radiant despite owning nothing. In the quiet of that moment, Siddhartha knew what he must do. One night, he kissed his sleeping wife and newborn son goodbye. He slipped through the palace gates as moonlight wrapped his silhouette and left behind silk for bark, opulence for emptiness. The Prince of Comfort stepped into the wild. For years he wandered, through forests and groves, through teachings and trials. He met sages and starved beside them. He meditated until his skin clung to his bones, until even his breath seemed a luxury. And still, the answer eluded him. Extremes, he realized, whether indulgence or denial, held no peace. So he sat. Beneath a Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya, Siddhartha placed his palms gently upon the earth and vowed not to rise until he understood the nature of suffering and the path beyond it. The leaves above him shimmered like silent witnesses. The roots curled beneath him like ancient fingers of the world, holding him still. And then came Mara, the tempter, the god of illusion. With daughters of desire and storms of fear, Mara tried to shake the meditating prince. He conjured armies from dust and desire from shadow, but Siddhartha did not stir. His heart once stirred by palaces and sorrow, had become as vast as the sky, untouched by fleeting winds. As the final assault faded into silence, the earth itself murmured in recognition. The morning star rose, and with it, so did the Buddha. He did not float or glow or summon fire. He simply opened his eyes and saw clearly. He saw the truth of suffering, its origins, and the path to its end. Not through gods, not through offerings, but through awareness, compassion, and balance. From prince to wanderer, from seeker to sage, from Siddhartha to Buddha, the awakened one. The sun had climbed slowly over the horizon on the morning Siddhartha Gautama opened his eyes as the Buddha, and with that breath of dawn, a new path unfurled, not just for him, but for the world. It would not be a road paved with offerings to distant gods or ecstatic rituals of denial and pain. It would not be gilded in luxury nor hollowed by starvation. It would be the middle path, a gentle road between extremes, carved with footsteps and silence, and marked only by balance. The Buddha rose from beneath the Bodhi tree not as a ruler or prophet, but as a teacher, and with each step he carried no possessions, only clarity. He began to walk, bare feet pressing into the earth with quiet reverence, moving from village to village, forest to grove, mountain to plain. Those who met him saw not a prince or an ascetic, but something else entirely. Calm eyes, a soft voice, and a presence that felt like still water on a windless night. He spoke not in thunder or scripture, but in stories, parables carried like lotus petals on the wind. He told of suffering, yes, but also of its end, of desire as a fire that feeds on itself, of the mind, restless as a monkey, leaping from branch to branch. And he told of the noble truths and the eightfold path: right understanding, right intent, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. No command, no demand, just invitation, a way to walk. The middle path asked not for martyrdom nor indulgence. It asked for awareness, to eat when hungry but not feast without need, to rest when tired but not sleep through life, to feel but not be ruled by feeling. It was balance, not between opposites, but within the self, a quiet alignment, like a string tuned to perfect pitch. Disciples began to gather. Some were merchants, some mendicants, some kings, some servants. Some had wept from great grief, others had burned with restless hunger. All of them found in his teachings a stillness they hadn't known they craved. And always the Buddha sat among them not as one above, but as one beside. Under fig trees and banyans, his robe pooled like saffron mist. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was with kindness like rain. He taught that to cling is to suffer, that even joy, when gripped too tightly, slips into fear, that life is a wheel always turning, and we find peace not by stopping the wheel, but by sitting at its center, that nothing is permanent, not the cherry blossom nor the wound, not the cry of a newborn, nor the ache of parting. And in this impermanence, in this gentle flow of all things, lies liberation. He saw enlightenment not as a ladder to climb, but a veil to lift. The light was not somewhere else. It had always been within. And when he spoke of nirvana, it was not a fiery heaven or jeweled palace. It was the absence of craving, the end of resistance, a state where the self no longer burns, but rests. Years passed like falling leaves. The Buddha aged, but gently, like a tree weathered by seasons yet rooted in calm. He witnessed sorrow, war and famine, but he also saw compassion bloom in unlikely places. in a child offering rice to a stranger, in a king choosing mercy over conquest, in the quiet tears of a monk finally letting go of rage. When the time came for him to pass, he lay beneath twin sal trees, their blossoms falling like snow in spring. His disciples wept, but he smiled. "All conditioned things are impermanent," he whispered. "Strive diligently." And with that breath he left, not in thunder or glory, but like a lamp extinguished in a room already full of light. So now, dear dreamer, let your breath slow like his. Let thoughts rise and pass like clouds across a moon. You need not grasp or push. Rest here on the path between too much and too little. The middle path is not a road you must find. It is the one beneath your feet, even now, leading you gently toward peace. In the high halls of Asgard, where the winds carried echoes of distant thunder and the rainbow bridge shimmered across the skies, sat a god who had seen too much. One eye watched the worlds with steady intensity, while the other had been given away, not lost, but traded, like a coin, for something more enduring than sight. This was Odin, the All-Father, the Seeker, the one who chose wisdom over comfort and sacrifice over safety. Long before he ruled over gods and men, Odin was a wanderer. Cloaked in shadow, his wide-brimmed hat drawn low, he walked the 9 realms not with an army, but with questions. He did not desire gold, nor victory, nor flattery. He wanted knowledge, not simple facts, but the hidden truths woven beneath reality, like threads in a tapestry only fate could read. But truth has a price. At the base of the world tree, Yggdrasil, whose roots stretched into darkness and whose branches touched the heavens, there flowed a sacred spring, the well of Mimir. Its waters did not simply quench thirst. They revealed the patterns of destiny, the secrets of gods, and the paths of men. Mimir, the wise guardian of the well, sat beside it, his mind full of riddles and remembrance. Odin approached him not as a king, but as a petitioner. He asked for a drink, a single sip of the well's wisdom. Mimir's voice, aged like stone, answered, "Wisdom demands sacrifice." Without hesitation, Odin plucked out his right eye and placed it into the water. The ripples carried it deep into the well, and in return, understanding rose like mist into his mind, visions of Ragnarok, the end of days, of betrayals yet to come, of truths too terrible and too necessary to ignore. From that day forward, Odin wore his loss as a badge, not a wound. The empty socket beneath his brow was not weakness. It was proof of his devotion to something greater. And yet, even that was not enough. Wisdom gained through water was one thing, but Odin knew that the runes, the deep symbols that held the power to heal, curse, shape reality and command fate, were not learned. They had to be suffered for. So he went again to Yggdrasil, the world tree that binds all realms together, and did what no god had done before. He offered himself. He pierced his side with a spear, the wound deep and real, and then he hung himself from a branch of the great ash tree, 9 days and 9 nights, without food, without drink, without comfort. Not even the other gods could understand it. They whispered and watched from afar as Odin's body swayed in the wind, grey and still, suspended between life and death, between knowing and being. He did not cry out. He did not beg. He waited. On the 9th night, just as the last stars faded from the sky and the dawn held its breath, the runes revealed themselves, not as letters, but as forces. They burst into his consciousness like thunder cracking ice, ancient and eternal. He understood their names, their sounds, their meanings, their silence. He saw how a single carved shape could bind a foe, heal a wound, summon memory, or alter a king's fate. And then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. Odin fell, not in defeat, but in rebirth. He rose from the tree, changed, not just a god, but a wielder of the runes. The All-Father, not because he ruled, but because he endured what no other would. He returned to Asgard, his one eye glowing with storms, and the other socket as deep and empty as a well. He surrounded himself with symbols and watchers. Hugin and Munin, the ravens of thought and memory, flew across the world each day and whispered all they saw into his ear. Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse, carried him between worlds. He donned the cloak of the wanderer again and walked among men, hiding divinity beneath dust and riddles. But always, Odin remembered, wisdom is never finished. There is always more to learn, always more to lose. So now, dear dreamer, if your mind feels heavy with thoughts, let them drift like ravens into the sky. You need not hang from trees or give away your sight. Let the weight fall from your shoulders. You're not meant to carry every answer. You are meant only to rest, knowing that the gods themselves once lay in stillness to understand the world. Sleep now beneath the branches of your own Yggdrasil. Let dreams whisper their runes. Let silence be your well, and may your night be full of gentle knowing. The winds over Asgard have quieted now, like a breath finally exhaled. The golden halls that once rang with the clamour of gods stand hushed beneath a sky painted in the soft purples and greys of twilight. The great gates of Valhalla lie closed, not in fear, but in peace, each warrior within resting beneath shields that have seen too many suns. High above it all, upon a throne carved of ash and time, sits Odin, not moving, not speaking, just watching. His one eye reflects the fading light like a storm calmed after the long march of ages. Around him the twilight thickens, brushing the edges of his cloak, which now lies folded like the pages of an unread prophecy. Above, Hugin and Munin circle, not in urgency, but in rhythm, wings gliding through air that seems older than memory. Thought and memory, feathered and faithful, trace the lines of the sky as if they're drawing runes across the heavens. They do not speak. They do not need to. Their silence is the sound of stories ending gently. No war horn sounds, no clash of steel, no cry of beasts or beasts of burden, just the wind through the branches of Yggdrasil, a low and constant hush like the breath of a sleeping world. The runes are quiet tonight. The tree does not weep, nor sing. It simply exists, vast and eternal, cradling the throne in its shadows. The spear Gungnir rests at Odin's side. The wolves Geri and Freki do not stir. They too have learned to sleep beside their master, to wait for the thing he waits for, not with fear, but with knowing. Ragnarok will come. The end will rise like a dawn, but not tonight. Tonight, the throne is still. Tonight, the All-Father does not wander. He does not sacrifice. He simply sits. And so, dear dreamer, let yourself sit beside him, not as a god, not as a warrior, but as a soul at peace with not knowing everything. Feel the hush of the air around you. Let your thoughts, like Odin's ravens, drift beyond the horizon, weightless and wide. Breathe slowly. Let one eye close, then the other. The world is not ending. It is simply sleeping. And so may you. Good night. In the kingdom of Ayodhya, where marble palaces shimmered like clouds caught on earth and the scent of sandalwood perfumed the air, there lived a prince named Rāma. He was no ordinary heir. His eyes held the calm of still water. His voice echoed with the cadence of truth, and every step he took seemed to ripple with the invisible weight of Dharma. The people adored him, not merely because he was brave or noble, but because he was good, pure, unwavering, just. He walked the path of righteousness, not because he had to, but because it was stitched into the very fibre of his being. But Dharma, like the moon, often waxes through shadows, and Rāma's path, though noble, was never meant to be easy. On the eve of his coronation, when garlands hung heavy on doorways and drums beat like 1,000 hearts rejoicing, the winds of fate changed direction. A promise once made to Rāma's stepmother reawakened like a buried serpent and slithered into the chambers of power. She demanded that her son Bharata be crowned instead, and that Rāma be exiled to the forest for 14 years, not as punishment, not for failure, but because Dharma demanded the fulfillment of vows, even unjust ones. And so, without anger, without protest, Rāma laid down his royal ornaments and lifted only the bark of forest life. His wife, Sita, chose to walk beside him, not as a queen, but as a partner in exile. His brother, Lakshmana, followed too, loyal beyond blood. Together, they left the city not in sorrow, but in silent dignity. The golden streets of Ayodhya faded behind them, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the hush of untamed woods. Years passed beneath canopies of green and star-flecked skies. Rāma lived simply, yet never wavered from who he was. But peace, like shadows, never lingers long. One day, a demon king named Ravana, mighty, 10-headed and draped in arrogance, set his eyes upon Sita. With sorcery and deceit, he abducted her, spiriting her away to his island fortress of Lanka. The jungle echoed with her cries, but they vanished into wind. When Rāma discovered her absence, the forest itself seemed to still, waiting. Rāma did not weep, he did not rage, he acted, gathering allies from across the earth. Monkeys, bears, warriors of the wild, he built an army not of conquest, but of love. Among them stood Hanuman, the monkey god with a heart as vast as the sky. With faith like fire, Hanuman leapt oceans, burned cities, and returned with the scent of Sita's sorrow. And so Rāma marched, across mountains, through seas, and into the heart of darkness. The battle for Lanka shook heaven and earth. Arrows fell like stars, and chants of ancient power split the sky. Ravana, proud and powerful, stood atop his golden citadel like the sun gone mad. But even 10 heads cannot outthink righteousness. Even 20 arms cannot hold back truth. Rāma fought not for vengeance, but for virtue. When at last he faced Ravana in single combat, the earth seemed to pause. With a bow drawn from the gods and resolve tempered by suffering, Rāma struck down the demon king, not with hate, but with sorrow. For even evil, he knew, once held light before it fell into shadow. He found Sita at last, and though joy burned in both their hearts, Rāma knew that their return must be as honorable as their departure. Trials followed, questions arose, and Dharma once again asked him to make difficult choices. Theirs was not a tale of simple reunion, but of principle lived, no matter the pain. Rāma eventually returned to Ayodhya, where lamps lined the roads like stars fallen to earth. Diwali, the festival of light, began not with fireworks, but with the quiet arrival of a prince who had never stopped walking the path of truth. He ruled with compassion, guided by wisdom, and loved with silence deeper than speech. And when his time on earth came to an end, it is said he walked into the Sarayu River and vanished, not as a man, but as a divine being returning home. He did not seek glory. He did not carve monuments to himself. Yet his name still echoes in prayers, dances, and stories whispered in every village and across every generation. Not because he was perfect, but because he chose to be good when it was hardest. So now, dear dreamer, close your eyes and let the forest embrace you. Let the rustle of leaves carry the memory of a prince who lived not for himself, but for what was right. May your sleep be as serene as Rāma's spirit, and may your dreams carry you gently down the river of Dharma. Long ago, beneath a sky stitched with constellations that still whisper his name, a child was born to a mortal woman named Alcmene, a child who would shake the very bones of the earth with his footsteps. His father was Zeus, king of the gods, whose endless pursuits often stirred both miracles and miseries in the lives of men. The boy's name was Hercules, though you may know him by the Roman name Hercules. His fate, from the moment of birth, was tethered to both greatness and grief. From Mount Olympus, Hera, the wife of Zeus and queen of the gods, looked down with fury. Heracles, after all, was a symbol of her husband's betrayal, and Hera's wrath was not a thing that passed like a summer storm. It lingered, deep and cold, shaping the boy's destiny before he could even walk. She sent serpents to his cradle, twin coils of death, to strangle his breath before it began. But the infant did not cry. Instead, tiny fists found the snake's necks, and with impossible strength, he crushed them in silence. A hero's heart, it seemed, beat in his chest even then. As he grew, Heracles became a giant among men, broad-shouldered, lion-hearted, capable of wrestling beasts and besting warriors. He was trained in music, archery, and the ways of war. Yet the curse of Hera shadowed him still. It struck not in battle, but in the quiet moments, when a spell of madness clouded his mind and turned his strength inward. In that haze, he did the unthinkable. He slew his wife and children, not knowing, not seeing, until the silence that followed revealed the horror. When he awoke from the madness, the world seemed broken beyond repair. No feat of strength could undo what had been done, and so Heracles did not run from guilt, he turned to redemption. The oracle of Delphi, her voice laced with divine truth, told him to seek King Eurystheus and accept whatever punishments were given. Redemption, she said, would come through 12 impossible tasks, not as penance alone, but as purification. And so began the labors. He faced the Nemean lion first, a beast with a hide no blade could pierce. In a cave, dim and echoing, Heracles wrestled the monster bare-handed, strangling it with arms like living oak. From its own skin he made his cloak, a second skin of invincibility draped over sorrow. Next came the Lernaean Hydra, serpent of the swamp, whose heads multiplied when severed. With fire and wit, Heracles burned each stump, ending the beast's immortal cycle. Then the golden hind, swift as moonlight, the Erymanthian boar, thunder-footed in snow, the Augean stables, thick with years of filth, all fell before his will, not just his might. He travelled to the ends of the earth, wrestling the Cretan bull, outwitting the man-eating mares of Diomedes, and capturing the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. He chased cattle across blistering plains, stole golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides, and, at last, descended into Hades itself to bring back Cerberus, the three-headed hound of the underworld. Each labor carved not just muscle into his frame, but wisdom into his soul. And yet the weight of his sorrow never left him. Strength did not protect Heracles from pain. In truth, it deepened it. He became a man who smiled with ghosts in his eyes, who laughed with scars beneath his cloak. The world sang songs of his triumphs, but few understood the cost of each tale. When death finally came, it did not come gently. Betrayed once more, this time by love and jealousy, Hercules donned a robe laced with poison. It burned him from within, devouring the very sinews that had lifted mountains. In agony, he climbed Mount Oita and built his own funeral pyre. But as flames curled around his mortal shell, the gods took pity. Zeus lifted his son to Olympus, granting him divinity at last. The man who had been broken became immortal, not as a god of thunder or sea, but of endurance, of redemption, of the strength to suffer and still rise. Now, dear dreamer, as your limbs grow heavy and your thoughts begin to drift, remember the story not of a perfect hero, but of a man who bore impossible weight and still walked forward. Let the warmth of his lion-skin cloak settle over your shoulders. Let the stars above sing soft lullabies of battles long won, of burdens laid down, and of strength that lives quietly, deep within the heart. Close your eyes. Rest. You do not need to lift mountains tonight. Let Hercules watch over your sleep, his sorrow turned to starlight. In a land of chill winds and mead halls lit by firelight, where the sea foamed silver along rugged shores and warriors carved their names into song and saga, a hero was born whose strength would ripple through the ages like thunder echoing across fjords. His name was Beowulf, a name shaped by old tongues, carried on the breath of poets, and laid into the bones of northern memory. He was no god, no demigod, no son of Olympus, or bearer of a magical birthright. Beowulf was man, flesh, bone, spirit, honed by the cold and the clash of blade against beast. Yet, from the moment he rose to his full height, taller and broader than others, the world seemed to bend slightly in anticipation, as though fate itself had chosen a son of Gaetland to stand against the tide of chaos. The first monster came from the darkness, as they so often do. Grendel, a creature of hate and hunger, crept from the moors to feast upon the men of Heorot, the great hall of the Danes. For 12 winters he slaughtered at night, tearing flesh from limb, drowning songs in screams. King Hrothgar wept for his people, and none dared face the beast until Beowulf crossed the sea. He arrived not in silence, but in strength, his ship cutting through the North Sea like a sword through mist. With warriors at his back and honor in his heart, he entered Heorot not to boast, but to protect. That night, as the fire dimmed and sleep blanketed the hall, Beowulf lay in wait. Grendel came, massive and stinking, his claws thirsting for blood. But this night was different. Beowulf rose, unarmed by choice, and wrestled the creature with bare hands. Muscles strained, joints locked, the two titans clashed until sinew tore and bones snapped. Grendel fled, mortally wounded, his arm torn from its socket, left behind like a grotesque trophy nailed to the rafters. But the song did not end there. In the depths of a lake, blacker than grief, Grendel's mother stirred. She was older than memory, older than grief, a being forged of vengeance and shadow. She rose to avenge her son, slaying one of Hrothgar's closest thanes. Again, Beowulf descended, this time into her watery lair, where no torch could pierce the gloom. There, amid the bones of the devoured, he found her. The battle was brutal and silent beneath the surface. His blade failed him. Only an ancient sword, forged by giants and left forgotten, could end her. With one mighty swing, he cleaved her neck, and the lake stilled. Light returned. Peace was earned, but not forever. Beowulf returned home to Geatland, not to retire in glory, but to serve. He became king, not merely by blood or title, but by merit, ruling with fairness, defending his people, and bringing prosperity to his land. For 50 winters he ruled, beloved and unshaken. But even the greatest cannot escape the slow turning of the world. In his final days, a dragon stirred, awakened by the theft of a single goblet from its hoard, a treasure vast and ancient as time itself. The dragon, fire-born and coiled in gold, flew across Geatland, burning villages, devouring all in its path. The king, now aged and weary, did not shrink from the task. He donned his armor one last time and raised his shield to face the beast. Alone but for one faithful warrior, Wiglaf, who would not abandon him, Beowulf met the dragon in a storm of flame and steel. Their battle shook the cliffs. He struck true, but the dragon's fire pierced his flesh, and as its body fell, so too did the hero. Mortally wounded, Beowulf spoke not of fear, but of legacy. He asked that a tomb be built on the cliffs, a barrow visible to sailors far and wide, so they might remember the man who gave everything for his people. With the dragon slain and peace restored, he closed his eyes, not with regret, but with the calm of one who had fulfilled every thread of fate spun for him. And now, dear dreamer, let the wind carry you toward that barrow. Imagine it, a high mound beside the sea, where waves lap soft against stone. The sun dips low, casting gold upon the earth, and the gulls cry overhead like the echoes of distant ballads. Beneath the earth he lies wrapped in honor, a sword at his side, his name carved in runes no storm can erase. Let the hush of surf be your lullaby. Let the story of Beowulf, brave and burdened, strong and sorrowful, carry you into gentle sleep. You need not slay monsters tonight. Simply rest, knowing that courage once walked this world and still lives in stories whispered across time. In a quiet village nestled among jade hills and soft river bends, the call to war arrived like a cold wind. The drums echoed through the valley, summoning men to defend the empire. The names were read aloud beneath the plum blossoms, one by one, until an old name stirred a young heart. Fa Zhou, Mulan's father, too frail to stand without his cane, too proud to show weakness. He bowed before the officials while his daughter watched, her breath caught in her chest like a song unsung. That night, the stars blinked dimly above the tiled roof of their home. Mulan sat alone beneath the paper lanterns, her fingers tracing the edge of her father's armor. Quiet, ancient, worn from wars past. She could hear his cough behind the walls. She could feel the weight of the empire's decree settle on her shoulders. No one saw her slip away before dawn. No one knew until the sun rose and found her bed empty. She cut her hair, she bound her chest, she wore his armor, cinched it close to her smaller frame, and rode out into the dark, dressed as a son. Beneath her horse's steady steps, the world changed. The girl became a soldier. For years, the wind carried her name only as a whisper among comrades. Fa Mulan, the quiet one with steady eyes and unflinching courage. She rode through mud and blood, slept beneath stars, and learned the rhythm of war, the pulse of battle, the silence of aftermath. She moved like water, flowing between ranks, absorbing hardship without complaint. And when the northern invaders crashed upon the empire like waves upon rock, she stood firm. In one campaign, her general fell, struck down in a snowy pass. The soldiers, leaderless and wavering, looked to each other for command. And it was Mulan who rose. It was Mulan who rallied them with words like flint striking fire, steady, sharp, needed. Beneath her, the horse reared. Around her, the men found their footing. They pushed forward. They won. Honor came not in the fanfare, but in the silence after. A scroll was delivered to the emperor himself, bearing her name, or the name she wore, praised for bravery, strategy, and grace under fire. She was offered a position in the court, wealth, power, a place among generals. But she asked for only one thing, to go home. And so she returned, not to trumpet and parade, but to the quiet rustle of reeds and the sweet aroma of jasmine tea. She stepped through the old wooden gate, the same one she had crossed in secrecy, now returned with strength. Her neighbors gathered, shocked to see a daughter in place of a son, a girl in the armor of her father, and a legend walking where a quiet seamstress once stood. She bowed, not for applause, but for peace. She smiled, not for fame, but for the faces she had longed to see in sleep. Her father embraced her without words. Her mother wept, the way only a mother can, her hands trembling over Mulan's cheeks, her silence louder than gratitude. There are many ways to fight, dear dreamer. Some wield swords, some wield silence. Mulan wielded both, and now let the final lanterns flicker low. The armor has been laid aside. She sits beside the hearth once more, the fire gentle, the night soft. She unbraids her hair slowly, each strand released like a secret kept too long. Her hands are calloused, but they move with grace. The window is open, and the wind carries the scent of magnolia. Let that wind reach you. Let it pass through your thoughts like a stream through moss. You are safe here, where legends sleep and warriors rest. Let Mulan's quiet strength become your own. Close your eyes now, and let your breath fall like petals to earth. You are not in battle. You are home. Now, dear dreamer, the night has walked you far. Through shadowed forests and sunlit temples, across oceans and under ancient skies. You've sat beside gods and warriors, witches and tricksters. You've stood at the edge of the world and looked into the face of myth. And now, with the hush of these tales still echoing gently around you, the time has come to rest. These were not just stories. They were reflections, mirrors, held to the hearts of civilizations. Amaterasu's light was not just sunlight, but the dawn of responsibility. Anansi's web was not just cleverness, but resistance wrapped in humor. Gilgamesh's sorrow, Mulan's sacrifice, Odin's hunger for wisdom, each one stitched into the great quilt of human yearning. Not for gods alone, but for meaning, for peace, for understanding. You've wandered with a prince beneath a Bodhi tree. You've listened to the laughter of a spider trickster. You've felt the fire of Hercules and the final hush of Beowulf's tomb by the sea. These figures lived in stories, yes, but also in every act of courage, in every whispered promise to protect, to dream, to rise again. In the hush that now surrounds you, let their lessons linger, not as burdens, but as soft lights that guide your thoughts as they drift into sleep. You carry their echoes now. Their names may be ancient, but their spirits are not lost. They speak still in your stillness, in your breath, in the quiet space between one dream and the next. Let the myths guide your breath. Let them wrap you in their old warmth, in the comfort of knowing that long before you and long after, others too have searched the stars for answers, faced monsters with trembling hands, loved fiercely, lost deeply, and hoped all the same. And now sleep, dear dreamer. You have journeyed far without ever moving. Let your body grow soft, your thoughts dissolve, Let the night carry their names and yours together, suspended in the same silver sky of storytelling. Good night, and may your dreams be vast as the worlds they once shaped.